Have you ever prayed with all your heart, only to watch your life fall apart even faster? You seek God for peace, yet chaos rises. You ask for clarity, yet confusion deepens. You cry out for breakthrough, but instead the pressure increases. And you quietly wonder, Lord, why does everything get worse the moment I start praying? What if the unraveling you fear is not a sign that God is ignoring you, but the very process He uses to rebuild you? In this message, we will uncover why heaven often allows the storm to intensify before the miracle arrives, and how your darkest moments may be the birthplace of God's greatest turnaround. When you begin to pray with sincerity, you are not just speaking into the air, you are stirring the spiritual atmosphere around your life. Prayer disrupts what is hidden, confronts what is broken, and exposes what has been quietly sabotaging your peace. That is why things often seem to grow darker before God brings the light. The pressure you feel is not punishment, it is spiritual movement. Throughout Scripture, God consistently allows temporary shaking before long-lasting transformation. In this message, we will explore why your situation intensifies right after you seek God, how these moments are actually signs of divine activity, and what you must do to stand firm until the turnaround comes. When you pray, you are inviting God to touch places in your life that have been wounded, hidden, or unresolved for years. Healing is rarely gentle at first. Just as a surgeon must press on the injured area before treating it, God often allows pressure to rise so the real issue can surface. You may feel emotions you thought you buried, relationships may shift, patterns you once tolerated suddenly feel unbearable. This is not chaos, it is revelation. Scripture shows this clearly. In Psalm 139 to 23:24, David prays, "Search me, O God, see if there is any offensive way in me." And what does God do? He reveals what must be confronted before restoration can begin. God exposes before He repairs. So when life becomes heavier right after you pray, it may be because God is answering you by uncovering what must be healed, not what is convenient. The pressure is not a sign that prayer failed. It is the evidence that God has begun His work in you. Sometimes, when you begin to pray, life feels like it sinks into deeper darkness, not because God has withdrawn, but because His light is exposing everything that was already there. Darkness always appears thicker when a new light enters the room. It shows the dust, the shadows, and the cracks that you never noticed before. Prayer does the same to your soul. This is why the Israelites, right before their deliverance from Egypt, experienced the harshest oppression they had ever faced. Exodus tells us that Pharaoh increased their burdens after Moses prayed and declared God's promise. It looked like God had made things worse, but in reality, the tightening was the final stage before breakthrough. And in Psalm 32:5, the word reminds you, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Night is often darkest just before dawn. So if your situation seems to collapse right after you start seeking God, it may not be failure, it may be spiritual dawn approaching. The darkness is not winning, it is retreating. When you pray, you are not only speaking to God, you are disrupting the plans of the enemy. Prayer awakens spiritual resistance because darkness despises movement toward the light. The moment you decide to surrender, to break a cycle, or to choose obedience, the enemy often fights hardest. This is why things feel heavier, conflicts intensify, and temptations grow louder. You are not imagining it, you are being opposed. Daniel understood this battle. In Daniel 10:12-13, the angel tells him that his prayer was heard on the first day, yet spiritual opposition delayed the answer for 21 days. Heaven moved instantly, but warfare rose in the unseen realm. In the same way, your struggle after prayer is not proof that God is silent. It is proof that your prayer is powerful. So when life becomes chaotic right after you seek God, do not assume He is absent. Often, the shaking is a sign that your prayer has disrupted hell, and the enemy is fighting because he knows what God is about to do through you. When you pray for change, God does not simply adjust the surface of your life, He aims for the foundation. And sometimes, the foundation must be broken before it can be rebuilt. What you interpret as destruction may in fact be divine reconstruction. God is not sabotaging your life. He is removing what cannot support your future. Jesus illustrates this principle in Matthew 7:24-27, where He contrasts a house built on sand and a house built on rock. Notice that both houses experience storms, but only one survives. Before God strengthens your foundation, He often exposes the parts that are unstable. That exposure can feel like loss, disappointment, or sudden collapse. But hear this clearly. What God breaks, He intends to heal. What He removes, He intends to replace with something stronger. What He tears down, He rebuilds with purpose. So if pieces of your life seem to be falling apart after you pray, it may be because God refuses to let you build your future on unstable ground. When you pray for breakthrough, God often allows your faith to be stretched before it is strengthened. Faith is not proven on the mountaintop, it is refined in the valley, tested in the fire, and revealed in moments when nothing makes sense. You may feel abandoned, but God is watching closely. You may feel forgotten, but heaven is measuring your endurance. This testing is not cruelty. It is preparation for the weight of what you asked for. James writes, "The testing of your faith produces perseverance." God does not test you to expose your weakness, but to reveal your capacity. He allows the heat to rise, not to burn you, but to solidify you. Abraham experienced this when God asked him to offer Isaac. It was only after Abraham demonstrated unwavering trust that God released the blessing promised long before. So when life grows harder after your prayer, do not panic. You are not being punished. You are being proven. God is shaping you into someone who can carry what He is preparing to give. Sometimes life grows harder after you pray because God is removing what cannot travel with you into the next season. Prayer invites God to elevate you, but elevation always requires separation. There are habits, relationships, mindsets, and even opportunities that look harmless, yet they would crush you if God allowed them to remain. So He begins to peel them away, sometimes painfully, sometimes abruptly, always purposefully. Jesus teaches in John 15:22, "Every branch that bears fruit He prunes, so that it may bear more fruit." Pruning is never comfortable. It feels like loss, like restriction, like something is being taken from you. But pruning is not punishment, it is preparation. God removes what drains you so He can multiply what grows you. You may not understand why certain people drift away, why certain plans collapse, or why certain desires suddenly lose their grip on your heart. But God sees the future you cannot. He knows what will hinder your destiny, and in His mercy, He removes it before it can remove you. So when prayer seems to trigger painful separation, remember, God is clearing the path for your next miracle. When everything begins to collapse after you pray, it may be because God is moving pieces you cannot see. What feels like falling apart is often divine repositioning. Throughout Scripture, God lets circumstances tighten just before He flips them. He waits until the moment when you know you cannot save yourself, so that when the breakthrough comes, you will never doubt where it came from. Consider the story of Lazarus in John 11. Jesus intentionally delayed his arrival. He allowed the situation to worsen, not out of neglect, but so that God's glory could be revealed in a far greater way. The miracle was not merely healing, it was resurrection. Sometimes God allows things to die so he can raise them in a form you never expected. Your frustration is real. Your tears matter. But they are not the end. They are the threshold. If things are getting worse, it may be a sign that God is closer than ever to turning everything around. Divine reversals often begin with divine disruptions.